Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed episode number 88 with Becca George, the life coach. Definitely learned a little bit about that. Still not 100% sure what a life coach does, but at least now I have a little bit of frame of reference. But I want to welcome to the podcast a brand new guest, and he's going to talk a little bit about something more important than we usually talk about. It's usually a bunch of funny ha-ha stuff, but we're going to get a little deeper here. So I want to welcome first on the podcast, Mr. David Keck. How you doing today?
Hey, good man. How are you?
Good. Ready to delve into this. I don't want to seem like, oh, we're gonna get super deep, but like I mentioned, it's an important topic, and so we're probably not gonna be telling fart jokes and whatnot. So, and if we do, who cares?
Exactly.
But, you have a podcast of your own, and right off the bat, it captured my attention. Right. So what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Surviving Abuse Podcast.
Yeah, and I mean, again, just right off the bat, it hits you in the face. You're like, whoa, that's kind of pretty direct there, because I see all the time on here, my podcast doesn't really have a theme or direction. We just talk to cool people who have a story to tell, but with something like with a name like yours, it's direct and to the point. What made you want to start a podcast about surviving abuse?
Well, 7 years ago, I was a victim of a hate crime. I am an open gay man in the South, in the Bible Belt. I didn't really know hate existed. I have such an amazing family and support team that I heard about hate, but I never had really experienced it until 7 years ago. And it really woke me, having to be very proactive in my mental health. And I joined a sexual assault group therapy that I still go to every Monday. And there are, it's me and a bunch of men, and it's so diverse, and it really also opened my eyes to that men don't really have a platform to go to. There's such stigmas that come with therapy, and women can hardly talk about abuse, especially, if it's some sort of sexual abuse in your adult life. And men really don't talk about it. And that's what causes generational abuse. You get so much anger built up inside, and then it starts coming out in different ways. So I wanted to provide a safe platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's funny. You mentioned that you didn't even really see it, that you thought that, that hate and all that, was just kind of like non-existent. Right. Similarly, when I grew up, I thought like, no, there's no racism, like, but right. Then again, I grew up in an all, Hispanic neighborhood where we're all the same. And, we hardly ever saw, or we never saw anything other than like, Hispanic kids and Asian kids. And we just got used to it, never even saw a white kid, never saw a black kid. And so I thought like, no, there's no such thing as racism. Till later on as an adult, you start experiencing racism, or you start seeing really bad examples of it. But again, to tie into that, growing up, it was kind of weird because you mentioned gay people, and it's like we, for whatever reason, we're groomed to just not like gay people. Like I didn't even know a single gay person, as a kid. But I just remember, like, for whatever reason, and I'm not gonna, say it was my parents that created that whole thing, but I mean, it was fed to them from somewhere, and it was,
Right.
and it was regurgitated into me, and I just remember feeling so much hate anytime I would hear like, oh, this person's gay, like, I hate them, I don't like them, or like even if it was like a celebrity, like I don't like them anymore because they're gay, and it's like it didn't make sense later on because I'm like, wait a minute, like what the hell does that have to do with anything, you know? Like,
Right.
and then I remember, like middle school and high school, and you start seeing people that are, coming out, or they're just, they're figuring out what's going on in their head and their mind and everything, and they're and yeah, and they're coming out, and you're like, wait, but I mean, I've been friends with this person since, kindergarten, or I've known them since forever, and so you start to really notice, like, okay, this shit doesn't even matter. Like, I know I mean, and I'm not trying to, make light of it. I know it's part of your identity, it's who you are, but I'm saying, in the big scheme of things, what the hell does it matter? We're all people, and
100%. And you had made the comment of you don't know what that your parents were taught that, which of course ended up teaching you that. And it's just what society teaches us, and then when it did start being on TV, they started having gay characters on TV shows and stuff. It was always the flamboyant, feminine butt of every joke. It was never brought to reality what, someone like me and my partner, we are very successful in our careers. We have a loving, open family. We are looking at adopting children. We have a gorgeous home. It doesn't show that stuff. It shows how to make fun of us.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and talk about, and it was some really like brutal stuff out there. Like when AIDS was coming out, people would be like, "Oh, that's the cure all for gay." It's like,
Yeah.
and again, we would as kids like kind of just regurgitate that stuff. I'm like, I cannot believe we used to say that out loud. Like, what
Yeah.
kind of shit is that for a kid to say? Um, and you're right. Yeah, it was kind of like there wasn't like a gay character on TV that was normal. It always had to be like some annoying over the top character, and I think, yeah, you're right, that maybe led to kind of really circulating that hate, because people are like, well, I don't like that character, you know
Right.
uh
Right.
but yeah, I mean, that's definitely, you know, had to have been difficult to live through. I mean, I'm assuming you're in your mid 30s or younger.
Well, thank you. But I'm 40.
Oh, well, there you
Yeah.
go. But I mean, we're about the same, same age, 5 years difference. I'm 35. Um, and you lived through that kind of, the part of history where we're still very like anti-gay, and now
Yeah.
we're like a lot more accepting. I'm not going to say everywhere, but
No, I think we're making strides,
Mhm.
but it's still slow, And I was so blessed, or I am so blessed with the family that I have. My at 18 years old, my mom and dad set me down and they were like, David, we know that you're gay. Be you. Let us love you for all of you, and you accept and love yourself. Because here's the thing. I was with a girl for 4 years in high school. I tried to hide who I was. And what if she and I got married? I could have stepped out on her. We would have had children. I would have lied to all of them and really fucked up their lives
Yeah.
when I decided to abandon them.
Hmm.
And luckily, I have the family that was like, David, please don't be one of those people that hurts other people because you can't accept yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Can't imagine that, but there's got to be, there's probably a lot of examples of that out there. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
can't imagine how many people try to hide it and maybe just convince themselves like, no, I'm a straight man, and I have to do what straight men do. You know.
Right.
Um, Now I want to switch gears a little bit and get back to your podcast. On your podcast, do you kind of tell more stories about yourself, or do you interview others who have gone through similar situations?
So I named it Surviving Abuse because I think there's so many different forms of abuse. And I want to cover all of those. And I thought it would also be kind of endless too, right?
Mhm.
And so in the beginning, I shared my story. And throughout the show, if I relate to somebody with something, I, share my part of it. Kind of like you're doing right now. You and I converse together. It's not you just sitting in a chair staring at me talking.
Hmm.
We converse together. It's like two buddies sitting on a couch. And that's what I want my show to be like. So we have you had brought up race, and you being Hispanic, and I've got my friends always say that we're such a coat of many colors. We're, black, we're white, we're gay, we're straight, we're rich, we're poor, we're fat, we're skinny, we're all these things, right? And we all love each other so much, and we're
Hmm.
all ride or dies. And I had a 3 episode on abuse where me and my black friends gathered around the table, and we discussed, what it's like to be a minority in America, and so that one has been getting a lot of hits. So there's stuff about sexual assault on there. There's one of my favorites is this guy named Jeffrey, and he at age 17 went to prison for 16 years for a rape and murder that he didn't commit.
Well,
And because the state wasn't doing their job correctly, the person that actually committed this murder was able to rape and commit another murder. And so finally, Jeffrey gets out of prison, and they proved his innocence, and they found that the guy that actually did that was already in prison for another one. And so Jeffrey got his GED and went to law school and became an attorney. And he's now one of the top attorneys in New York, and has had 7 wrongful convictions overturned, and had
well.
7 people released so far that's in prison for something they didn't do. So, we talk about all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. And that's an incredible story, and it's really cool to hear how people who have survived, they have this resilience, right? I mean, a lot of people don't, right? And things end up a lot different for them, but the ones who really, are resilient. I mean, I'm just like amazed by what they end up doing. Like you mentioned, your friend, and now he's helping other people get out. But even just the ability to bounce back and live a normal life, to me, that's amazing. I like I said on this podcast, we do a lot of just humor and funny things, but the first real kind of serious topic that we had was, I think it was around episode 15 with a friend of mine, Mary Eileen, and she told a story about growing up and surviving abuse and trauma, and it was like every kind of abuse you can think of, right? And that one was a real powerful episode, because now she's talking about, like, I am finally kind of trying to live like a normal life, and I think a lot of people related to it. Just a lot of people listen to it. I think that's the one episode where I always got the most messages, and people were able to, I tagged her on the episode on social media, and she was able to get messages from people. And it seems like, people really like to listen to these stories and be a fly on the wall, almost like you're, sitting at like a therapy session, right?
Mm-hmm.
But people don't really like to talk about their own trauma and abuse, right? Do you kind of get that same sense as well?
100%, especially with men. Men feel like it is taken away from their masculinity.
Mhm.
And it's not. When if a full grown man can sit down and cry because someone fucked them over, that to me shows how strong that man is. I think it's the complete opposite than what we get in our heads about. We're told that a man's got to be this protector and this fighter, and sometimes we just need to fucking cry, and that's okay. Now, I have had several people um, be a part of the show, and they will use a fake name,
Mhm.
and that's totally fine. They won't give their location, and that's totally fine. That doesn't matter. That is not what's making your story. If I had you call me Daniel the rest of the day, that's not going to take away from what actually happened to me. And if anything, it just makes me feel safer to be more open about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, luckily, with technology, we have ways that we can hide our identity when it comes to stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to have that release. That's what it's about. And another thing that is very important to me, I have never, nor will I ever mention my attacker's name on my platform or anyone else's. It's not about him. It's about how I survived. He chose what path I had to be sat on.
Mm-hmm.
But I choose how I react to it, and I choose going forward how I recover. There are so many people that would have been in my place that would have turned to drugs and turned to alcohol, and I didn't. And
Mm-hmm.
you had mentioned that your podcast is mostly humorous stuff, but that's also a form of therapy. And in the beginning, you were talking about, I guess, the episode last week of having a life coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we realize this, but having the platform and using it for any way that you and I are doing is kind of being a life coach. It's helping people have that escape, that hour of laughing or that hour of crying if they need. And one thing that I try to always let people know, I don't want anyone to ever log off my show and be like, "Good Lord, I'm depressed now," or "I need to drink now."
Right.
We talk about trigger warning heavy shit,
Mm-hmm.
but in the beginning, we talk about a little bit of light stuff. In the middle is where it's that hardcore stuff, but we always end it on a positive note because these people we've survived, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like this guy that attacked me, and trigger warning, but this guy that attacked me, he spent 2 hours raping me with foreign objects as well as his body. He gave me chlamydia.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily that's curable. But I got down. I've never been a big guy. I think I weigh maybe 130 pounds
Okay.
when my attack happened, and I got so depressed and so caught up in how society was treating me because the media made it sound they blamed the victim. It was my fault because I went to a straight bar. It was my fault that I got followed home and attacked because I'm gay.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when women get raped, as well, she had this low cut shirt on. That
Oh,
doesn't matter. That is not an invite.
right. Mm-hmm.
But so I started getting a bunch of death threats. People were, wanting to find me and finish the job. I got down to 98 pounds. I was so depressed,
Yeesh.
so
Mm.
disappointed, and that could have killed me the way I was going. Luckily, because of therapy and great platforms, it's kind of what introduced me to podcasts.
Mm.
Having that moment of turning on something and laughing with somebody, whether I was on the show or not, was just nice. So when you talked about life coach, we might not call ourselves that, but it's kind of what we are. We have people, you had me on this show today, and it might have been the way the universe works because somebody, one of your listeners, one of your fans needed to hear this message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes I just think that's the way the universe works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Everybody gets something out of this, and that's why I try to have a variety of people on. Because every now and then somebody will tell me like, "Wow, I really like that episode." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "I didn't really hear anything about it, but as long as one person, got something out of it, that's really cool."
Right.
And like that's why I like that whole fly on the wall thing. People like to be that fly on the wall listening, and that's why I like to have conversations. I can't imagine sitting here on the podcast just doing an hour of talking politics all by myself.
Right.
Like there's only so much I can do. I mean, um, I, I mean, politics is something that's just very draining. And then if you're just kind of having a conversation with yourself, I don't think you get as much. Like people like to probe and ask questions, and I think that leads to deeper conversation. I mean, that's just me, but
I
I,
agree.
I think we mentioned a lot of just a little while ago how people don't like to talk about situations that they were put in, and you know I think with women a lot of the time specifically, and I don't know if anywhere else, but especially growing up Hispanic, you'll see where women are told like, oh no, don't say that about your uncle, don't say that about your cousin, like they didn't do it, like it's just they want to protect the aggressor, and like you said, victim blaming, they'll want to blame the victim, like why did you say that, like now everybody's going to look at so and so a certain way. But that's just nuts, right? I mean, do you see that a lot too? I mean, talking to people on your podcast, or I mean anybody that you've had these conversations with.
It's funny that you said that about the Hispanic culture and how they want to protect. When I've had a couple of black guys on my show that has been hurt or abused, raped, whatever the case may be, and the black community is anti-gay.
Mm,
Not as much now as they were, but one of them brought to my attention that the black community felt as if they had to be a certain way, that they couldn't have any flaws because they were already flawed just by their color.
mm,
And so now, if you're a gay black man, then what the hell are you? And so when you said it about the Hispanic community, it made me think of that. So it's funny to see how even the different cultures have different ways of expression or acceptance, but every single person that I've talked to has been victim blamed or
mm.
asked to keep a secret.
Right. Yeah.
Don't let them know that your brother or your mother or your uncle did this. Let's just keep it in the family.
Hmm. And I can only imagine how like how that kind of would irk at somebody daily. Like if it was, especially if it was like a sibling, and you have to see them every day and just know what they did, and almost like put a fresh coat of paint on it every day. Like that would suck. You want to say so much, but you can't.
Right.
Um and um I don't know. I wouldn't be able to keep up with something like that. I'd either snap or do something drastic. And I think that's why a lot of people maybe try to turn to like alcohol or drugs.
They
And
have to have that escape.
right, yeah, and that's what, yeah, that's what I was leading to. It's an escape, and um do you see that a lot, or have you talked to anybody on your podcast where they had a like a period where they were just kind of escaping with drugs or alcohol, or anything else?
100%. We all have had our vices, and it comes in different forms. I went through a phase where, so I didn't have sex for a year. I did not, I mean, obviously I was recovering. I had to learn how to walk again. I had mental problems. Um, and just so you know, if I start to stutter or if I just stop talking, it's because I now have non-epileptic seizures. So my brain kind of freezes for a minute. So I usually tell people that in the beginning. Luckily with podcasts, like I edit mine to where,
Yeah.
you don't notice that. Um, but yeah, so, I went a year without having sex.
Hmm.
And when people were telling my story, because it became very public, I had no memory of what happened. So people were creating this narrative for me and telling me what happened. And every day I was reading a different news article of what I did and didn't do and how it was my fault. And it got me to a very dark place. Again, I didn't know hate existed.
Hmm.
So I wanted to be public with my story, not realizing that people were going to want to finish the job and create their own narrative. I thought I was going to be helping, and it hurt me in the beginning a lot more. But I became very upset about not knowing my story, and so I wanted to start doing things to trigger myself, and I became promiscuous.
Mm.
I started having very unsafe, and I don't mean condom unsafe. I mean like with strangers,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, sexual acts that were not safe
Mm-hmm.
because I was hoping it would trigger me.
Mm.
And honestly, that could lead to a whole other form of abuse, right?
Right.
Luckily,
Yeah.
I was able to get it under control. But I found that that's very common for people. I
Mm.
didn't know that. But no one goes through some one form of abuse. It opens the doors for them to abuse themselves,
Mm-hmm.
for them to find other people that abuse them, for there to be drug or alcohol abuse. And what's really scary, man, is the guy that did this to me probably has went through some form of abuse himself and
Right.
suppressed it.
Mm-hmm.
He is now lashing out. That does not justify what he has done by
Mm-hmm.
any means, but that's another reason why I want to be a platform for it, because I want to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that has been raped or sexually molested, it's usually happened to that person too.
Yeah, it's like getting bullied, right? If you're getting like, pushed around at home or whatever, you're the bully at school,
Right.
right? So you're absolutely right there. I didn't even think about that. You know how this guy could have possibly been, raped or molested as a kid or whatever, and now he took it out on you, and you could have very easily turned around and said like, I'm angry and I'm gonna get my power back. Um,
Right.
Something interesting I think you mentioned is that people were telling you your story, and I didn't realize that this was a story that was like it was published. It was like in newspapers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that must have added a completely different layer to it because now yeah you've got the at least your world there telling you like what they think it is, and you're like that's not what happened, right? Or they're giving you an opinion that doesn't even matter because they weren't there, and they don't know all the details, and uh
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean.
So the news media caught wind of the story because the guy that attacked me was military,
Oh.
and after he thought he murdered me, he stole my car, my credit cards, and my money, and went bar hopping covered in blood.
Jeez.
And so he ends up getting drunk and wrecks my car.
Mhm.
Well, when the cops come to the scene, he's got my ID, my credit cards, my car registration. He's covered in blood that's not his blood, and he confesses to murder. So they find my body 18 hours later and was pronouncing me dead.
Ugh.
Well, then when the media caught wind of it, they wanted to come to the hospital and talk to me, but my family would not allow that. And I was unconscious. I was fighting for my life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So they go to the police station, the media goes to the police station and gets his confession and
Mhm.
bases a story on that. Well, his confession says that he did this because I sexually propositioned him.
Mm.
When come to find out, that wasn't true. The surveillance cameras in the bar show that me and my friends left, and 3 minutes later, he walked out by himself.
Mm.
And they show that he stopped me in the bar like an hour or so before and tried to start conversation with me. I was polite and spoke to him for a minute, and then went to the bathroom by myself, and then walked right past him and joined my friends.
Mm.
So he ends up confessing in court that he told the police that I sexually propositioned him, and that's why he did it, because it would justify doing what he did,
Mm.
and that the cops would go lighter on him because they would have done the same thing.
Mm.
So when the media releases the story, it pretty much says gay man goes to straight bar, sexually propositions a straight guy, takes him home for sex, and gets beat up. So that's where all of the hate mail and death threats and all that started coming in, to the point that cops had to surround my house because people were driving by taking pictures, and they thought that for my protection there needed to be a policeman at every door.
Well, yeah, especially since you're going up against, Captain America there, right?
Right.
You're going up against, a military guy. It's like, that adds that extra layer, especially in the South. Like they got that Walmart patriotism, I'm sure. Some of them.
Right.
That's incredible. I can't believe, and sometimes I think about, like, oh, when celebrities get, like, bad comments in their comment section. I mean, do they just kind of, like, swipe it away and, like, yeah, whatever. But in your situation, it's like it's not just like, oh, well, I'm gonna give it an opinion on like a public figure, or like a celebrity type thing. It's more like, I'm gonna give an opinion on your, you should, like, whether you should be dead or alive. It's much deeper there.
It taught me a lot, because I say that I became famous in a small town.
Mm.
I could walk into, hell, I've walked into a Walmart and this woman came running up to me and grabbed me to hug me. She felt as if she knew me because she'd been following my story. That is so sweet, and I appreciate that. However, running up to someone with PTSD is triggering for people. It was such a trigger for me. Luckily, she looked at me as like her son, right? She just wanted to embrace me and hold me. But I always had that thought of, what if I walk into a Walmart or the mall and someone sees me and they come running up to me because they want to finish the job? Because your mind is always going to go to that negative place. Well, it really opened up my eyes as far as the comments that I make about people on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And because people were leaving stupid stuff, they're like, "Oh, well, David was probably high in this guy's car with him, and that's what happened." Well, I don't do drugs. I
Mm-hmm.
am pro marijuana. I think it should be legal everywhere. I think if that's what someone, I just personally don't like the way it makes me feel. I like uppers and not downers. but I don't do it. And they even did a drug test to see if I had been date raped or anything like that, and not even marijuana came up in my system,
Mm-hmm.
So these narratives that people were making and putting out there, it even affects people so much that when I was going to look for a new job,
Mm-hmm.
people Google people.
Yeah.
You Google my name, the first thing that pops up is hate crime. Straight man or gay man gets beat up for sexually propositioning a straight guy,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure there are jobs that rejected me because of that.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right. Because you're right. I've hired a lot of people, at work, and sometimes you got to Google them. You're like,
Yeah,
I'm a little on the fence about them, and if you have somebody's phone number or email address, or even just their name, it's so easy to just read a headline and be like, nope, not
yeah,
not not gonna go with that.
yeah,
Even if
yeah.
you're not the one at fault, you just don't want that heat. You don't want that controversy or that attention. You're just,
Exactly.
so. I mean, that's just crazy. For to be in the spotlight like that, I can't imagine. Um, Now, we talked about your podcast a little bit, and then just different types of stigma and whatnot. But how about, having survived something like this, right? What do you tell the person who doesn't know what to think, who's kind of just like, coming out of their situation, and they don't know if they're going to turn to drugs, they don't know if they're going to, become suicidal, they don't know if they're, gonna, how they're gonna recover, right? What's some, and it's not one size fits all, I get it, but what's
Sure.
some, some advice maybe you can give somebody who's struggling with their own abuse or trauma?
I first want to let them know that it is not their fault. They did nothing to deserve it. So I know me telling them that is not going to be able to find that off switch and turn it off. But the more that we remind people that, then eventually it's going to catch, right?
Mhm.
I am a huge advocate for therapy. It has
Mhm.
completely saved my life. I still, to this day, every Monday, go to sexual assault group therapy. There are a lot of things that people don't know, that your state has victim advocates. And if you are a victim of some kind of hate crime, rape, domestic assault, call your state, and there are places to go for therapy that are free to you. There are resources out there that isn't publicized, and so call and get that help. And the last thing that I make sure that I tell everybody is don't suppress things, and don't fear those dark places. We are all going to have those dark thoughts come to us.
Mhm.
Visit them. They are there for a reason. If I start to get triggered or have a memory, or start to think about my attacker, I allow myself a certain amount of time to do it. You can visit that place. Just don't unpack your suitcase and live there.
Mhm. Yeah. And I hope to see more people really, unpack their trauma, and this includes everybody, and myself included. I don't like to, I didn't, I wasn't abused or anything like that, but I mean, definitely grew up in a domestic violence household and whatnot, and it's kind of one of those things you just don't talk about, and I think most people have something that they're suppressing, something in their past that they're kind of just bottling up and whatnot. And I know when I do talk about it, it feels a little better because then you start to hear like other people like, oh yeah, I grew up that way too, or hey, it's not your fault. You had to grow up so quickly, and um, it really it's again like listening to a podcast where you're the fly on the wall. It's just it's like you're validating what happened, and you're not the only one, and um, I don't know. It's something that doesn't come natural to me just because I grew up with that whole machismo thing where you don't talk about it.
Right.
Um, and I think we're at a point, you know, at least in most of society, where we can kind of just get over that bullshit. Get it out. So if it's so tough to get it out there, then hey, maybe you want to look at it this way. You're the tougher guy for getting it out there. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, hell yeah. I also want to make sure that I state that your trauma or your addiction or your abuse cannot be compared to someone else's, and
Mhm.
don't do that. There have been so many people say I would love to be on your show, but I feel bad talking about my abuse because what you went through is so much bigger and harder than what I went through. That is not true.
Mhm.
My hate crime is the hardest thing that I have went through. That doesn't mean that something harder isn't going to come up one day, but at this moment in my life, that is what I have went through that has been the most difficult to overcome. I don't care if Linda down the street broke her hand. If that is the most difficult thing that she is having to recover from, or that has happened to her, it can't be compared to mine. Don't compare your tragedy with someone else's. There's not one that's bigger than or greater than.
Mhm. Yeah, and even something like us living through this whole pandemic and COVID now, that's kind of, I mean, in the same realm, and I think I'm really kind of having some issues stemming from that, and I'm sure a lot of people are,
Yeah.
but that's just the world we're in today. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to see, is there anything else you want to throw out there to the podcast world as far as trauma, abuse, anything like that goes?
I mean, man, I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate your platform and letting me do this. I know that we didn't get to laugh too much, but I hope that we kept things kind of light. But
Yeah.
if anybody has any kind of story they want to share, I would love for them to reach out. You know, we're all affected by something some way,
Hmm.
and I would love for people to reach out, and if they want to be a part of the show, great. If they just
Yes.
want to be a listener, great.
Nice. Where can people find you online?
So my website is probably the best landing place. It's got all the social media links and links to all the podcast episodes, and that is surviving abuse. Uh, uh, I'm sorry, survivingpodcast.com.
Okay. All right. Are you on Instagram or anything like that,
Yeah,
or
yeah. Surviving Abuse podcast is pretty much going to
redirect?
be the
Yeah.
name on everything. So putting that in usually takes you to me.
Nice. Yeah, well, people check it out. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a follow on there, and I really I'm curious to hear more because I haven't checked out your podcast yet, but again I saw that name. I'm like, that's gotta be some interesting stuff. One way or another. Whether you're into the stories or whether you're into just the whole conversation of it. Um, it's gotta that's gotta be a hell of a listen, and I'm excited to check that out myself too.
Well, thanks so much, and I've become such a fan of yours too. I appreciate you having me on your platform. I hope that someone out there was able to take something from it. I appreciate you letting me, one thing that I love about podcasters is we don't try to compete with each other. We all want to help each other. It's not
Right.
about my show being bigger and better than yours. So I appreciate that, man, and I am a fan. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Again, thank you for joining us. For everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night.
Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.